How you guys doing? We're going over the distribution of fast laps and laps led between the Truck and Xfinity Series season of last year. I'm not going to use the driver rating secondary sheet for these because I just didn't like how that came out, but I'm not re-recording that with everything I had to go over and everything. And so when we're looking at, we're going to start with the Xfinity Series. When we're looking at the Xfinity Series here, you're going to notice that clearly like the top teams were the guys who are carrying the most amount of laps led. And now, granted, the 20 car was basically just an all-star car for Joe Gibbs, whether it was Eric Almirola, Christopher Bell, Hamlin, whoever was in the car and stuff. But you see, yet again, kind of relating to what I mentioned with Larson and the outcomes of like the best drivers, and really like when we look at all series, I mean, even if you just go real quick back to the Cup Series, it's a lot closer at the top of the line between the outcomes of these drivers versus or these teams versus the Xfinity Series, where there's a pretty significant drop off of your four guys who were able to actually or four teams rather who were actually able to do something. And then I mean really same thing with like Kligerman, like a lot of, and when we look at these smaller, I was going to say smaller slates, when we look at the smaller series, place differential is much more significant, especially for your mid-tier guys versus the Cup Series and stuff. Like Kligerman, for example, a guy that we end up playing quite a lot of due to his place differential stuff. We had a lot of situations where Kligerman would start like 19th or 18th in a race, and we'd expect him to finish, around 9th or 10th. Same thing with Riley Herbst at times, Sammy Smith at times. And so you're noticing that really a lot of the guys up in the middle, or I mean, this is the middle, but like the upper, tier or the bottom top tier, however you want to look at it here, are guys that would have significant place differential in these races here. And so like you have Josh Williams, who like started last in like every single race last year, right? You'd have Austin Hill and Jesse Love, who would most likely start in teens in every single race. You had Ryan Sieg, Kyle Sieg, who would start, towards the back of the field in every race. And really, I mentioned it with Sam Mayer yesterday. Like when you look at how bad Sam Mayer started. Yet again, this isn't including the 500 or Atlanta, but you look at wreck out, wreck out, wreck out. But when he was actually able to run, we had Sam Mayer scoring pretty much over 50 points in every race where he was actually competing in, and stuff. And so, like, is that a real representation of what he can do, or not what he can do, but like is this average what he can do? He was very much a coin flip of he's going to score you over 50 points or he's going to wreck out in the race. And actually, I just prefer plays like that because it makes it much easier instead of having like a Midland play or a driver who would score anywhere from like 19 points, like 27 points. Like I typically don't like that in a DFS play, whereas like Sammy Smith is like, or not Sammy Smith, Sam Mayer is the guy who is gonna either explode in DFS points or literally wreck out. You look yet again, pretty significant for the Xfinity Series that we see more of here versus like the Cup Series and in the Truck Series is that like Brennan Poole, who Poole, oh man, I just went blank on his name, Ryan Ellis. We look at these two individual drivers, and you see that these guys, because they started last in like every single race, and I'm just bringing it closer so you can see over here on the left side. Like you look at what these guys are scoring points wise and stuff, basically starting last each week. This is a situation why, in pretty much every race. And yet again, I mean, it's easy to say hindsight, being 2020 or being at this point, but this is like a reason why, like every single race, you would want one of Poole or Ellis to fill out your lineup, especially if you're paying up for, Cole Custer, whoever's in the 20, Justin Allgaier, situations like that. And, yet again, talking about variance and how, how wildly, volatile NASCAR is and how it's the most volatile sport out there is, I mean, when you look at the top guys, we talked about Larson yesterday on his either dominating performances being wrecked out. Same thing up top. Now, Allgaier wasn't as bad at this as it was in previous years. Although, when I think of like, I believe it was the Bristol race to where he was involved in like 3 wrecks. He blew the tire late at Phoenix here. But you look at like the top guys of how often your top guys are actually running into issues or just scoring poorly. And I mean, the splits here of the outcomes of, really, when you look at the 4 higher scores on the year, how many of those guys are being involved in an incident, and how many races are we running into situations to where like 2 of those guys are involved in incidents? Playoffs, I generally tend to look at less because you have different storylines. You have the final 4 being given a room. You have guys, drastically racing as stupid as possible, Martinsville, to try and make it to Phoenix. But if you look at Kansas and before, and you see, when actually everybody's like not just points racing, when the, you have the faster guy, not even the faster guys, you have like really everybody just actually racing. Like they're not trying to make it to the next round or anything. They're just racing. And you see that for the majority of these races, you're having pretty much one out of, the main 4 players being ran into issues. If you look at it in terms of not even just wrecking out, but, mispricing, not mispricing, but missing value. Because for the most part, the 20, 00, Chandler Smith was, in the 9K ranges and then would slowly drop and stuff. But between Allgaier, Cole Custer, and whoever was in the 20 car, you're looking at people who are 10K or above. And then you look at what these guys are scoring here, and you're seeing the likelihood of them actually paying off is actually pretty low. This is a situation where, maybe you're just looking at this, and in my head, I probably need to be more significant on just playing one of the expensive guys entering this next year, and possibly playing more of, the mid-range guys, or not mid-range, but like more of the 8 and 9K guys, because they're showing that they're getting there, on average more times than not on place differential. Now, yet again, we're going to have pretty low, average scoring here. But that's a takeaway that I see. And then, I mean, just look at all this red. I mean, this is absolutely insane for what we're seeing on the outcomes of these races. When you look at the laps led, this is a different story. You're looking at laps led being held now, unlike the Cup Series, although that's more fast laps. But even still, you look at the laps led distribution for the Cup Series, and it's still pretty significant all over the place. Maybe not all over the place would be the correct wording, but you see that there's a lot more guys fighting to get laps led than in the Xfinity Series, than in the Truck Series, which we'll look at, in a second. So yet again, this is more so in line of why we see, when we look at the points distribution and stuff of how people are scoring, you're having, the gigantic lap leaders in the Xfinity Series, either be determined on what they're doing in practice or what they have done recently at the 1.5s and stuff. Which, like, duh, I mean, that was kind of a stupid statement. But you know what I mean. It's not as spread out. We're not having random guys, go out there and, kill the field. Now, there are situations like that, but for the most part, the Xfinity Series is not a place to where you want to be playing, a tertiary or, a 4th or 5th, favorite entering the race. Favorite in terms of betting odds, in terms of practice speed, in terms of qualifying position. Like, we want to focus on the main fast guys for the Xfinity Series. And we see a situation to where a lot of these times you had 2 guys lead a significant amount of laps in these races. This is a pretty, and we'll look at these first here. Let me see, because it's mainly the same guys. We got the 20, 0, 7, 81, 7, 0, 20, 81. Okay, so your top 4 are still there. Let me give me a second. Hold on. I was looking to see if I could sort it to where I can line these up, but I really don't want to destroy the sheet because right now this one is sorted by total laps led and stuff. Just kind of eyeballing as we go through. You look at the different. Now, it's not always the case. I mean, we see a pretty identical outcome between the 2 Martinsville races, but like you look at the difference of how people are racing. As I stated, why I typically don't like using like the championship at Phoenix for a data point, because people are kind of just rolling over and it's a drastically different race. The first Phoenix race for Xfinity Series, you see 3 guys leading laps, and then you look at, I believe Richmond might be the same as well. Did we not go to Richmond too? Guess we didn't. Did we? Hold on. I had to check. I could have swore Xfinity went to Richmond twice last year, but I guess they did not. Um, I mean, you look at this drastic, landslide at Phoenix being held by one lap leader, to where you see what happened last year, or not last year, but in the spring race at Phoenix. Um, I was kind of wanting to look through if we saw anything that was like similar between these short tracks, but we really don't. Because I was like, okay, what happens at Phoenix, Martinsville? Yet again, we didn't have Richmond. Bristol's its own thing with the amount of yellows we have, but we look at Iowa, and there's really, kind of just eyeballing here. There's really no comparison of where the laps led came from between these short tracks, because we had three here. We're gonna say three main lap leaders for the Richmond race. We look at Iowa, we had three. New Hampshire had two, but then you get in the second half of the year, we go to Martinsville, back to one, Phoenix back to one. So maybe, and this is just me speaking out loud for my own stuff, maybe be more open to more lap leaders at the start of the year in the short tracks versus at the end of the year, because short tracks are still my worst track for me personally in DFS. Even though I did just get although I do have my William Byron diecast from the Martinsville race like 2 years ago, where I tied for first in that one. But that's like the one off. Like, I just suck ass at short tracks, and then I tie for a GPP, and then just continue to suck ass. So I just don't know what I'm doing on my end, but I'm trying to just think out loud of things I need to pay attention to for the short tracks. When we look at the fast lap sled, now, yet again, refresher, this is what the Cup Series looked like, okay? All around. We see green all around for every race, okay? We look at Xfinity, and it's still condensed to the faster cars for the most part, outside of people who have drastically just bigger talent, like Corey Hyman, Sam Hunt car, I don't know what Dean Thompson is going to do in this car. I doubt it'll be anywhere near what Corey Heim and the people who were driving the 26 last year were able to do. But you see, your fast laps in the Xfinity Series are being correlated right around the faster guys for the most part. It is very rare that you're going to have somebody who is in a big team lead laps. Kind of the opposite of what we've seen in the Cup Series, to where that stuff has been spread out more and more. Yet again, Xfinity is more like the olden days of the Cup Series, to where it's just condensed around certain people, and it's not spread out. And it's really, really hard because these Xfinity Series races are so short, unlike the Cup Series, to where you can kind of pin and get off sequence. Okay, with the limited amount of tire sets these guys have, and with the fact of how short the races are and where the stages are, it's really hard for you to either pit and get off sequence and not just burn the tires off. You're typically pitting in the Xfinity Series or short paying or getting off sequence to kind of leapfrog people, and typically you're putting yourself at a disadvantage by taking tires early, so you're not incentivized to burn tires off when you get off sequence in Xfinity. That is almost detrimental to you. Like, if you're a car and you have, if you're a fast car, right, and you have we'll just say a flat tire on like lap, 11 of the race, right? You're already down a set of tires, and you have to take that new set, or at least, you might not be, for the most part, you're changing all four tires if you have a flat, just in case what happens. For the most part, the team will take the tire off that's flat, right? So you completely lose that set. We're saving the other three tires, okay? Hopefully that flat tire was on a left side tire, because it's not as important. If you blow a right front or a right rear early in a race, you're just completely down a set of tires. Like, that's the side that truly matters. And so when you take a set of tires early, you have to then extend the life of that second set to either get back on track or I was not going to say back on track, but like to stay on the same strategy as the rest of the field, because like ideally you have to just run that one long. So we don't see a lot of fast laps, distributed between, guys who aren't fast due to these reasoning strategy. You're at a disadvantage taking tires early or taking tires separately from the field, so on and so forth. Now you can get to the lead at that point, possibly. There's been situations where like Cole Custer or Justin Allgaier have been off sequence and stuff, and they have to run long, and they sometimes get the lead, when a caution comes out or whatever the case may be. But you don't see those fast. Now, those might be a bad example because these guys have a lot of fast laps up here. But like, whereas you see what's happening with the fast laps in the Cup Series between like, oh, hey, man, Ty Gibbs is running fast laps. Oh, Keselowski's running fast laps. Oh, Chris Buescher's running off fast laps. We don't have people like that, really, for the most part, in the Xfinity Series, okay? Whereas, as I stated, if you're making projections or you're doing whatever, you kind of have to give, a significant amount of fast laps to pretty much everybody in the field for the Cup Series on any given day, That's a lot going on here. For the most part, you don't have to do that for the Xfinity Series. And even people who are able to gain positions, in terms of what their DraftKings points are, let's talk about like Ellis. Let's talk about like Brennan Poole. We'll talk about like J.J. Yaley, stuff like that. When we look at what they're actually doing, like Brennan Poole, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong here, he only had 16 total fast laps out of all the races that we've seen here, And we look at the fast laps there. I mean, 11 came at Richmond, 3 came at Charlotte, 2 at Indy, and that was it. We're not getting fast laps from the guys in the back of the field. Ryan Ellis probably has even less. He's looking at a total of, 7 on the entire year, because like what is the reasoning behind like these guys running fast? Their attrition plays. They're starting in the back of the field. They know they have a better car. When you look at what Ellis and Poole and what these guys are able to do all last year, is you pencil them in for like a 23rd place finish or whatever. But they don't have the fast lap upside that you would look at for people in the Cup Series and stuff like that. If I'm not mistaken, having looked at it, in like 2 weeks or whatever, we're gonna react live here. I'm pretty sure trucks are look similar, if not more aggressive than the Cup Series or than the Xfinity Series. But we'll take a look here. So let's go ahead and look at the laps led in the Truck Series. Now, the fact that we're losing the 2 car for Rev Racing, since and I'm trying not to bring news and stuff into that, because it's kind of pointless making of like, or talking about, hey, this is happening to this team or this is happening to this team, because right now, we're January 12th right now. Tons of stuff that's going to happen in the next 3 weeks, right? But like, just right off the bat, the fact that, before we get to trucks, the fact that like, Riley Herbst and Cole Custer were able to do this last year. Specifically, this is more impressive. The fast laps that Riley Herbst and Cole Custer were able to have last year looks really, really good for a significant increase in those fast laps for Sheldon Creed next year and Sham Mayer next year for the Haas factory team. The reason I'm bringing that up is, we're losing a driver. Now, he didn't get as many laps led last year, but we look at the fast laps that the 2 car that had. This is basically, support from the Spire team. I'm not sure why this is scheduled as a Ford there, Mr. Abnormally Distributed. But Nick Sanchez, by and large, was getting the Spire, here, actually, let's put this, because this just came out yesterday or whatever. Like, this is a pretty significant tell here, we're there. And I mean, for the most part, that's probably why we're not going to see a 2 car or a 2 truck next year. They're just going to be with the 71, 77 and stuff. But you look at how small this field is, and you look at how small this field is, and you look at the amount of laps led, like it's even more aggressive than the Xfinity Series, because there's less cars. There's such a big gap in what, the top tier equipment can do versus the mid tier versus the bottom of the barrel teams. Shout out to look at truck points really fast here, so you guys can kind of see the distribution of where this is at. Although this gets muddy very fast because of how, you want to talk about volatility for Cup and Xfinity. I mean, look at every race here and just look at the amount of bad plays, right? Like, this is where I am of like, why use a mean projection set as like your starting base? Because like the floor and ceiling for any individual driver in any individual race is pretty significant, pretty huge. I mean, I mean, hell, just look at this here. We look at the average between now granted, yeah, more laps led, but you look at how close the average of DraftKings points is for the Cup Series. Now granted, more points available, so the top is going to be much higher, and you're going to see, the 16th be much closer. But when we look at the gaps, and I'm not even saying in like a percentage change, but you look at how close these numbers are to, we start going through Xfinity Series, and there's a much bigger gap between the top and the mid-tier play, and then the bottom is actually pretty trash, pretty terrible. I mean, it's pretty crazy. When you look at these, like Parker Retzlaff was the worst DraftKings play for the majority of these races. Worse than Haley Deegan, worse than Joey Gaze, worse than Jeb Burton, worse than Ryan Ellis and stuff. Pretty crazy stuff. But you then look at the Truck Series, and we don't see that bottom, completely fall out. We don't see, like Parker was at like 3, 8, 9, 11. We look at the Cup Series, and it is, we have a 13, 14. The Truck Series is so volatile that we don't even have an average below 14 on these races here, because the amount of people who are DNFing and the amount of situations where you can just roll around and survive, and look at all the red here. Crazy stuff. We're looking at, for the majority of the field, really, like in each race, we'll just count like the bright red ones, right? Whether that could be a DNF, and this is what I focus on more rather than how people finish, because, clearly we're trying to make money off of DFS. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That was North Wilkesboro. Charlotte, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. I mean, this is, and that's not even including like, when you score like, 18, when you're clearly not doing anything. I mean, look at the field of how bad, this Truck Series is. There's people that's going to wreck everybody. What did Dean Thompson do in the races he did last year? It's 5-car, wreck, didn't wreck, scored 50, wreck, scored nearly 40, bad race, 40, wreck, 27, 36, 28, 31. I mean, that's why you play Dean Thompson. That's why, who else? Another guy, Chase Purdy, who had a pretty phenomenal run to end the year last year, 46, 41, 48, 45, 51. When he's not involved in a wreck, he's going to be scoring you close to 40, if not 50 points and stuff. Anyway, going back to laps led, you look at what I need to do this. Hold on. Bam. We look at the fast laps for these guys, and yeah, sure, it's the main people here with Eckes, Corey Heim, Ty Majeski basically just like trading, who's going to lead each race last year. But I mean, the Truck Series is its own animal. We look at the fast laps and stuff, and shockingly enough, when we compare Xfinity to the Truck Series, it's kind of more spread out. Now, you could argue that this is due to the volatility of this series. I would lean it more towards, and I have no, this is more of a gut feel and stuff. But when you look at what happens in the Truck Series more than the Xfinity Series, when we run this now, yet again, we don't have green flag pit stops in a lot of these races, but like the opening race, it wasn't last year. Was it last year? When did Raja Caruth win? Give me a moment. Oh my God, it was last year. It felt like it was eons ago. Look at a situation like Las Vegas, right? The opening Las Vegas race that Raja Caruth won in the 7-car. Hey, look at the amount of fast laps that he had in this car. He only had 7. We had Gillen, the 38. Why are we doing here? I need to do this. Hold on. You look at Las Vegas. Let me bring this to the side here. You look at Vegas with My bad, it was 16. You look at Vegas when Roger Cruz got 16 fast laps in this race, and he ended up winning this race. You look at the no, actually, this was Kyle Busch in the 7. Roger Cruz had 16. You look at what happened in this race. This race went green. We had green flag pit stops, and we had several people go a lap down. So right off the bat, we already have green flag pit stops, plus people on different strategies, plus people on different laps. So people, laps down. And so we see, Corey Heim, Ty Majeski, Cruz did drive up through the field and get up to like third. You had the one car who I don't remember was in it at that time, and you see it spread out at the intermediate tracks, and it's condensed at the short track at Bristol, condensed at Martinsville, spread out a little bit more at Texas with the the amount of yellows that we had, really condensed between the 91, who I would assume would be Zane Smith in the Kansas race, and Corey Heim. Also, the Corey Heim numbers are pretty wild because if you remember, Corey Heim was qualifying quite poorly to start the year last year. So we see a lot of huge numbers here because it would be very difficult for Corey Heim to be scoring that amount of DraftKings points in the Truck Series races if he was starting up front. You got to remember he was, or pretty much chalk in all these races for the amount of track position that he had, or place differential that he had, rather. But then he also was able to scrape off as many fast laps in these races as well. Let's see. We look at Darlington spread out. Wilkesboro spread out. And when I say spread out, I mean, I'm just looking at the amount of guys who kind of got over 5. That's kind of more of a significant number. We don't, that's kind of like the default that we would project for, anybody in the Cup Series, whereas that's a pretty significant number for the Truck Series and stuff. Milwaukee was spread out crazy. So we don't really have a... we compare it to the Cup Series. I mean, maybe the Xfinity Series is just more condensed than either of these two series because we're seeing fast laps spread out among a lot of people for this Truck Series here. Yet again, kind of last look at points here. Just kind of, going through or, just kind of reviewing of what people did at a wide telescope. We're not zooming in and paying attention to what did Eckes actually do here. We're just looking at the the distribution of outcomes for these two series, the Truck and Xfinity Series as a whole, just to kind of remind us of how crazy stuff is. And probably seeing this is probably taking more wild stances for the Truck Series might be worth it. 2 reasons being is, one, we're seeing massive ownership on people in the Truck Series and Xfinity Series, but really for the Truck Series because place differential is really the end all be all. So when we have chalk plays in the back, we see them have a significant amount of ownership and stuff. You then combine that with the amount of red that you see here of what people or what their outcomes are. It makes you really wonder. Maybe I want to be underweight on the chalk on the Truck Series, or pivot on hey, what is really the difference between Daniel Dye and somebody like Dean Thompson or Chase Purdy and Dean Thompson, Ty Dillon when he was still racing, Dean Thompson, these guys here. I think the Truck and Cup for kind of different reasons, but the outcome's probably the same. As you probably kind of want to embrace volatility in the Truck and the Cup Series. Whereas Xfinity Series, I mean, the points will probably also be that way, but I mean, actually, the greater point might just be, volatility is going to be huge in all 3 of these series, actually. There's probably not one. Laps led are more projectable for the top guys in these 2 series, Truck and Xfinity. Fast lap probably not so much. I don't know. I think my takeaways is clearly we're gonna have where we want to go in races in terms of builds or drivers or whatever, but it's probably more to embracing volatility than probably what we've been giving credit for, or at least maybe what I've been doing. When I enter any given week, I probably need to kind of embrace the volatility nature of of NASCAR probably more, especially when or combine that with the condensed ownership that we see in Xfinity and Truck. We probably want to take advantage of that. Either way, this is the distribution of fast laps and laps led for the Truck and Xfinity Series. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.